Hello, everybody, and welcome to a VOD EXP experience, videos on demand, H3 style. Today, I'm joined by Dylan Burns, who is you guys might recognize him. This is how I know you anyway, is from the really incredible on-the-ground reporting you've done on the war happening in Ukraine. And so basically, I'm here to talk to you about Ukraine and also to touch on the insane kind of defamatory hate mobs that people like Hassan have sent you as well.
Anytime I get to talk about the war in Ukraine, I'm very happy to do it. Thanks for bringing me on. I'm happy you've heard of my work before. It's very flattering.
So, I mean, what is important about the war in Ukraine to you? What is it?
There's a few things that's important. I think one thing that's important is that warfare is transforming like fundamentally in Ukraine. I'm going to be publishing an article soon about how drones are like reforming the face of logistics, how now people want to just minimize movement. Those type of large mechanized offenses that people know of the past have been replaced with just people kind of living in holes, flying drones everywhere, trying to sneak across grassy fields and thermal blankets, trying not to get spotted. And so there's still like a lot of mass infantry assaults, but people view it as kind of like World War I with drones, when there are trenches, but it's almost like every trench is separated by like a kilometer or two. It's like bubbles of infantry life. Protected by walls of drones, millions and millions of them swarming the sky 24/7. And I think that is fundamentally going to transform warfare. On both sides, yes, on both sides. It's to try to go from to walk like 400, 500 meters took me like a half an hour when I was in Pokrovsk.
Oh, wow.
Because of how present the drones are constantly. You have to run from building to building, room from room in order to try to like dodge that type of activity. I think the other big reason why I care a lot about Ukraine is that I do think that the fundamentals of bringing this type of warfare, of conquest, of erasure of national identity, of moving mass peoples off of land and then settling new people on that land, banning language, closing down churches. I know there were 40 Baptist churches in Metropole. I know many of those people from those congregations. They were expelled. They can't operate their churches anymore. And of course, there's the human in safari in Kherson, which the atrocities and the war crimes are a daily basis. Firefighters, they would like throw fire bombs in homes. The homes would burn. And as people are trying to like run out, firefighters come, and then the drone teams who threw the firebomb bomb the firefighter. Then they bomb the ambulance crew, and they bomb every type of civil service that's trying to help people cling to life. And so I think this type of stuff needs to be very thoroughly documented, because journalism is the first draft of history. And if you fuck it up, then there's no undoing that. And people should know what's going on there, because there's not really a lot of headlines about, old grandmas getting hunted for sport.
I've never heard anything. I mean, I know it's really bad there, but yeah, the specifics of it. I mean, I know that the Russian army is brutal, vicious, but I am surprised to hear that they're just killing all the public servants who are trying to help, But
when I was in Kherson, the street sweepers, the ones that had money or had family that cared about them, had drone detectors on their chest so it would beep, so that they knew the drones were in the air and they could go hide in a building. And that was the only way they could operate in Kherson. And when I was in Konstantinivka, which is currently getting attacked from 3 sides, the street sweepers there, I'm surprised there's anybody really left in Konstantinivka. The entire city has basically been bulldozed. It looks like a giant demolition job. But people there are stubborn, very stubborn, and they still street sweep to just keep some sense of normalcy, and they have to constantly be on the lookout for these drones, which a lot of times will just hit any sign of life, but it will depend on the individual drone pilot. Kherson, though, it's the worst. All of the drone pilots over there are demons.
That seems terrifying, just these little fucking mechanical flying death machines. Like, it used to be that you had these big, massive planes overhead, you would hear it coming from, you would see it. But these drones are a whole different threat, and it just seems terrifying. Not that being bombed by a conventional airplane is any less terrifying, but yeah, it's just a different battlefield.
It's a different threat, because I remember the night bomber drones that I was with. These things can take up a bomb the size of a fat beagle into the sky and then drop it on your trench. So these are extremely large explosives, and they operate these things mostly at night because they're harder to see. But I've also been with teams that have started to operate them during the day because of just the constant of, Russian assaults and needing to operate, and they've been using them to do logistics. And so those are very terrifying. The constant presence, how frequent they are, how constant they are. They're cheap, they're inexpensive, and so you can swarm everywhere. That's what's great about drones. The planes, they're terrifying in their own regard, because When I was in a basement in Pokrovsk, it was made very clear to me that if the building was hit by a cop, we were all dead. Those are like the aerial bombs that are dropped by the planes, because it'll bury the entire building on top of you. And a lot of babushkas living in the basement trying to shield themselves from, the artillery fire that's constantly hitting outside their apartments would be, crushed in their own homes, and there's not really much you can do at that point. So they all offer like a different type of terror. But the drone problem has gotten so bad that the dead in Pokrovsk are not being evacuated, and they're just burying people in their front yards. We documented that. We're not the first people to document that. Others have documented that, but it's more valuable to bring out somebody who's 180 pounds and living than 180 pounds and dead.
It seems like the infantry these days, is it just a ton of drone operators? Because, I mean, if there's so many drones, they're being manually controlled, I assume.
Yeah, they're being manually controlled. There's some experiments that people are engaging in to get AI involved. For example, in the last 3 to 4 seconds, you're most likely to get jammed. People have jamming equipment on everything, on cars, on all sorts of stuff, because drones are just so constant. And there's been AI programs to make it so that when they cut that video feed for the last few seconds, the AI can take over and try to identify what a target is and hit it. But it's mostly, for the vast majority, it's going to be controlled by people. And they just constantly fly these things out. I've filmed with a lot of FPV teams all across Ukraine, and it's just a constant stream of 1 drone, 2 drone, 3 drone, 4. I mean, I'll see them throw 15 to 20, 25 FPVs out in a day if they're like working really busy on or like on an active part of the front. And they'll take they'll take routes where somebody will operate for 12 hours, then the other person comes, replaces them, the other person sleeps in these tiny little dinky rooms and basements of little village houses all across Ukraine.
Wow.
80% of the losses right now are from drones. Drones are the big killers.
The hot battlefield where the armies are clashing, this is just mostly drone, and they're just trying to find each other.
I mean,
and
most people who die never see a Russian or a Ukrainian from the other side. Like most people who are dying, you're dying in a trench, getting bombed in some way. I mean, even for the infantry, it's that way. The ones that actually see the Russian or Ukrainian infantry up close are the ones who are holding the line of contact. They have the most difficult job, the one who has to assault a trench and take it and hold it, because the Russians have a good idea where you are. They're going to constantly be throwing artillery at you, constantly throwing mortar fire at you, constantly throwing these drones at you, these nighttime bombers, and they'll be streaming infantry at you almost like 24/7 in order to make sure you can't sleep, you can't rest, and it's difficult to rotate anybody out without a catastrophe. A lot of these guys, I remember when I was with prisoner soldiers, these are Ukrainian convicts who have signed with the armed forces in order to get out of prison, so they will join the army. These guys were in such a violent area, and they're dealing with so much pressure. It's for some of these positions, like you can only be there for 3 days, and if you stay any longer, like it starts to break you. It's very difficult.
Tell me about like the political mode. Like, was there something specifically that happened that got you, to go to a dangerous
interested in all this?
Yeah. Was there a catalyst?
I mean, I was interested in international affairs when I was in late middle and early high school. I went to a school where you could use a computer, you can be online, and during lunch I would follow like Syrian civil war updates. I thought it was fascinating that I could get information from people's iPhones that they just record all across Syria from like the comfort of this like lunchroom in high school, when this is something a president 80 years ago would have killed for. I found that very fascinating, and I got an interest in foreign affairs. But when the Russian invasion happened, we were told a lot of things. We were told that first it wouldn't happen. And then we were told, well, if it does happen, it's going to be over in like 3 to 4 weeks. Neither of those things ended up being true. I saw a lot of people were paying attention to my coverage of what was happening, and I thought, what could I do with this extra attention? I could either improve my studio, get like some recording equipment or something, or I could go there and try to figure out what's going on myself. And I chose the latter. At first, I thought it was going to be 3 weeks, and now it's been almost 4 years. I told my grandmother at first I would just be interviewing refugees in Warsaw, but within a few months I was with territorial defense on the Zaporizhia front, because I don't know, it just sucked me in. That happens to a lot of people here.
Here's an image of what some of the drones look like. That's massive. I didn't know they were that big. I don't.
Oh, that's a different type. Those are the Shahed drones. You got the tiny FPV drones. Those are the drones they throw at big cities. I did a documentary on the teams that shoot those down. They use machine guns from like 100 years ago. I mean, like you're talking like right after World War I, going into World War II machine guns, all the way up to modern machine guns, whatever they can strap on the back of a pickup truck. and they'll drive around to these different places where the drones are coming at night to strike production, to strike electricity, to strike shopping centers, whatever it could be, civilian housing often, and they'll just shoot them out of the sky after getting radio calls of where they're coming in from. These guys, a lot of them just do it on their free time. These are people who have 9-to-5 jobs, and they just spend their weekends shooting down Russian drones out of the sky. It's like it's not a hobby, but it's a type of side project.
What is it like flying into Ukraine? You
can't fly into Ukraine.
So how do you get there?
You can't. They'll shoot you down. You have to fly into Poland, and then you have to get in. Either you have to drive across the border, or you have to get in a bus. I usually take the bus. It's the cheapest way, and I find it simple.
So it's just a public transit. Like there's people coming back and forth still between Poland and Ukraine.
Yeah, there's people coming back and forth, and I have military accreditation. That means I'm accredited with the armed forces of Ukraine. So as a journalist, I can stay in Ukraine for 365 days a year as long as I get that refreshed. For an average tourism visa, it's 60 to 90 days. So I don't have any trouble at the border, really.
So politically speaking, what is the issue here between with Russia and Ukraine and the invasion of Russia? And I'm asking this, by the way, I'm extremely pro Ukraine. I'm setting you up because I want to kind of hear your philosophy from the kind of ground up.
Why is the war happening? Is that the question?
Well, why is it important to you to get there and report on this, other than the combat aspect of it?
I think it's important to make sure that the things that happen here aren't deniable. I remember one of the experiences I had that were very transformative. I was in Kherson covering the flooding. The Novokakhovka Dam exploded. It was blown up, and then water flooded into nearby communities, drowning a bunch of elderly and disabled people in their homes. And I embedded with some rescue teams that were making animal shelters for the animals that were fleeing, and that were going out there and try to rescue people and check if anybody was still left. Go and get some cats or dogs that were left behind in the scuffle to not drown in your home, And when we were out there, I kept seeing signs again and again of aid workers being targeted. I would see aid workers come back to me with, wounds on their arms and on the skull that they could show me. I saw homeless people with open gashing wounds from recently being shelled. And I saw how bad it was that in the middle of these aid operations, the shelling was going on. We go to the shoreline to do this aid operation, and we get hit. My friend John Jones, he's hit in the stomach. He has to be dragged from the shoreline, this elderly British expat. I was supposed to be in there with him. I was very lucky, given all circumstances. Next day, I go visit him, and the Russians posted footage of us getting bombed, and they said that we were Ukrainian special forces trying to create a bridgehead on the other side of the river, and by bombing us, they'd save Russia. So by the footage that we gathered, we were able to directly contradict them trying to lie about what's going on here at the source, where they're posting footage of war crimes, of the direct targeting of aid workers, and just claiming we're Ukrainian special forces. And that type of stuff happens very, very frequently. And I think just making sure that the story is straight and people can't lie about what's going on here, that was a big motivation. Outside of that, I think the Ukrainians have a right to their own country. And that we made a promise as the United States in the 90s. And I think that we should not perpetuate the image of Americans as snakes.
Totally agree. It's such a shame that, Ukraine made this ultimate sacrifice of giving up their arms, their nuclear bombs, in exchange for a guarantee of safety. And if you're not going to do that, then who the fuck? Nobody else is going to give up their nukes. We have no hope for peace ever.
It was even worse, in my opinion, because you got to understand, Ukraine was in a position where they were breaking inflation number records. Before the collapse, you had German economists saying that Ukraine probably was the most prospectively optimistic economy of the Soviet Union. And then after the collapse, after everything went under, they had a record-breaking inflation rate of over 10,000%. Children were on the street selling their bodies for food and for money, for anything to get by, anything to get a fix. It was horrible, absolutely disgusting. And in that moment, we didn't just say, hey, you have to give up your atomic weapons in order to, be able to get some signal of protection. But also, if you don't, we're not going to send you food aid in this moment of starvation. So it wasn't just that we held nuclear weapons over their head. We also held food aid and food for their children over their head in this moment of starvation in order for them to give this up, which is what makes it particularly painful for me.
Yeah, I was actually one of those children without food in the 90s.
This
was me.
This is Galia, by the way. She's a Ukrainian refugee here, or she lives in Canada. But isn't that technically true?
Technically, I'm not a refugee.
Oh,
I'm just working. Yeah, but I fled Ukraine. Yes, that's right. That's correct.
But anyway, she works with us, so she obviously has perspective. What were you saying, Galia?
Yeah, you were just referencing my childhood, because in the 90s, there's basically were so little work and so little like jobs around that my parents were jobless, and then my granddad worked for like 3 years without getting salary. So there was like the food was my main concern when I was a child. Wow. So whenever like you're describing food aid in the 90s, for me, I remember I used to go to the kindergarten, and it's like such a vivid memory from my childhood, and my parents were just so relieved that at least I would have food in the kindergarten, because at home there wouldn't be enough meat to feed me or like vitamins. And I remember getting a little yogurt every like once in a while, like once a week in my kindergarten. It was like such a relief, a snack, such a perfect food to have. And I'm not saying that I was like the worst case that happened to children in Ukraine, because my granddad would still like fix up someone's cars to earn some money around. But there was a time where like almost like all of my family for 2 to 3 years could not get a salary income, even though they kept working. Yeah.
That's honestly so sad. And I don't even understand that deal, because I mean, at the end of the day, it just benefited Russia.
Well, the deal after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the large consensus was, and there was a lot of fear about the collapse of the Soviet Union. It's kind of weird to think back upon, but there was fear about what would happen to these atomic arsenals by concentrating these weapons in one country like Russia. It leaves less opportunities for them to be sold on the black market. It leaves less opportunities for them to fall into the wrong hands. Where if you have all these weapons, spread out between Kazakhstan and a bunch of other Central Asian countries, Tajikistan, wherever, Belarus, Ukraine, this country, that country, this country, it leaves more opportunities for, atomic terrorism or some sort of, these were the big fear stories that were being talked about in Capitol Hill at the time as to why it had to be given up. Oh, and Boris Yeltsin was being very clear that if the Ukrainians did not give it up, then they would just invade and take them anyway. So this was, from the American perspective, this was a way to avoid a war, as well as avoid a possible atomic catastrophe.
I see. I kind of want to ask you about the perception, because it seems to me, from what I can see, is that you are bravely risking your life to go out there. I'm sure you've probably felt. Have you ever felt your life was in danger while doing the reporting?
Yeah, on a few times. So
you're going out there, literally boots on ground, and doing some really valiant, important journalism, against on behalf of a country and a people that's being hostily invaded. And yet there's so many people that just shit on you online, and I literally don't understand it.
I don't know, maybe I'm just ugly.
I don't think it's for your looks.
You never know. I mean, I don't feel particularly picked on. I honestly, I see like how a lot of Ukrainians get treated, especially like on like Russian Telegram and the type of stuff that gets reposted. So I don't feel particularly picked on. I mean, I think that people have been unfair to my work and their characterization or of their characterization of me. But I mean, people jumping to quick judgments, that's what every streamer has to deal with. That's what people have to deal with all the time. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a little bizarre when, I'm going to the front, I do the type of work that I'm doing, I come back and I just see a bunch of people double my age acting like children.
Right. I mean, it gives you probably a whole different perspective coming back from a hot war. But like this kind of stuff, like Hassan, he's been probably the main person who's saying shit like this. But like I'm going to play this clip and then we'll talk about it. But in this clip, he calls you a war tourist pervert.
Chad, has he responded to Dylan Burns' post, by the way, before getting clapped? If you think that I would entertain such a psychotic thing ever in my life, I don't know what to tell you. There is nothing more perverted and psychopathic than literally putting Ukrainian people in Ukraine that are being fucking bombed, okay, by an invading force that is unjustifiably occupying their country, making Ukrainians sit down and fucking watch.
But his own logic says that Palestinians shouldn't ever do interviews because they're being bombed. It makes no fucking sense. It's a double standard.
I just don't like I don't like how he's treating them like children.
Right.
I mean, that's what it feels like. I mean, he interviewed people like the one guy from Yemen. You don't think he's ever heard jets like screaming over his apartment, considering how much Yemen has been torn apart. Its architectural history has been demolished. It's people bombed by the Saudis who do not care when they drop bombs. They care less than anyone. And so it's just, to me, I don't really think it makes sense. I mean, like, you could say this about a lot of people who are in vulnerable positions, but people in vulnerable positions often also want platforms. And none of the people I interviewed were people like I'm holding a gun to their head. One was a former Hassan fan. I went out of my way to like find people who even knew of Hassan's content before, who even liked him, because I wanted to get a diverse set of perspectives. We got people from all across Ukraine, we got people who grew up Russian speaking. We got people who grew up Ukrainian speaking. We got people who are from the rural countryside. We got people who are from the big city. We got like a bunch of different people, but the characterization of them just kind of takes away their ability to speak for themselves. Like, you're the biggest streamer talking politics on the platform, and you should expect people who are, you're talking about their country. The people in this country are going to talk about you. I mean, that's to be expected.
That's a great point. I mean, it should be reciprocal. And he should be interested in what they have to say. I mean, these are people who are there living in those conditions. He's in beautiful, sunny, Los Angeles in a beautiful home and drives a beautiful car and lives in total safety and comfort of, I don't know if you heard him say, he goes, I'm thinking about going to Gaza. And then when he found out it was dangerous, he's like, oh no, I'm not going to go there. But like, you're doing that. And these people are living that life.
Look, I don't expect people to do what I did. Like, I understand that what I did would probably be considered radical. But I do expect that if you're going to be like talking about a country, you got to be on point. And if you mess up talking about a country, you got to expect some response or some critique, and not to speak over the voices of, vulnerable people who are having their country bombed. It's like, I understand that having somebody in a country that's getting bombed criticize you isn't really a good look. It doesn't look good, but you treating them like their voices aren't worth listening to is an even worse look.
Except
and all I've ever wanted, I don't need Hassan to talk to me. I don't want Hassan really to talk. If he wants to talk to me, I'm a grown man. I can talk to whoever the hell I please. But I would want him to talk to people who are displaced from Donetsk. I want him to talk to people who are in Ukraine. The best conversation he ever had about Ukraine was with Bernie Sanders, former foreign policy advisor, who's just of Ukrainian heritage. But by being of Ukrainian heritage, it was still the best conversation he's ever had on Ukraine, because he was able to go back and forth with him over his language about, Ukraine's use of proxy and what that means to Ukrainians. And if he was to have a much like I think just more down-to-earth conversation with the people of the country he's talking about and wants to continue to talk about, I think it'd be good for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, anyway, here I'll continue the clip.
That clip's out of fucking context in a way that you have framed it to have them go, oh wow.
The out of context thing is always interesting. I mean, it's just people talking. Just people talking.
How fucked up, fuck this guy. It is literally the most unimaginably insane thing I've ever seen.
It's really
in
not.
my entire life. It completely betrays how much you care about the conflict that you are covering on the ground. It's nasty as fuck. It's such a weird psychopathic thing to do, especially considering that I have time and time again, over and over again, repeated my position, okay, that it is completely unjustifiable to invade Ukraine. Russia is cruel for doing such an act, and that Ukrainians, of course, have a just cause for emancipation. Not only that, but I've also raised money for Ukrainian refugees. This community has raised $300,000 for Ukrainian refugees. It is so insane to do a Jubilee video on this, okay? I don't know what to say. It basically betrays the position that you have. Like, oh, I genuinely care about this. That's why I went out there, not because I'm like a fucking war tourist pervert, but I went out there because I care about these people. So what am I doing? I'm like fucking using this as an opportunity to be like, yeah, look at how bad this guy is. Like, what the fuck?
It's incredible how much effort he goes to deflect and not answer. But at the end, to me, is just totally out. It's just totally fucking unacceptable the way he talks about you as a war tourist pervert for doing journalism that he supposedly fucking should care about. I don't know. I found that whole thing so gross.
I mean, I did segments on Tucker Carlson and what he had to say about the war and having Ukrainians react to it. Tim Pool, like all sorts of people. And if you watch the Ukraine, it's not like they're in pain. No one's holding a gun to their head. They're laughing. They're giggling. Some of them like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he said that. Like, you can go talk to them also individually. Like they most of them have social media presences where people could go DM them if he wanted to speak to them individually and clear up any I mischaracterized X, Y, or Z. And I most of the information that he's talking about, like, hey, I never said that Russia should invade Ukraine, or I never said, like, a lot of this context I included. I explicitly included at the start that he does not support the Russian invasion. Like I spent over an hour trying to make sure that there was a decent amount of context for these people to, jump into this American streamer's mind on Ukraine for a bit and give their takes on it. But again, if you're the biggest influencer talking politics, you should expect people who are in the countries you talk about to watch and respond to the content you put out. The fact that I was the device that was used to do that doesn't say anything about my intentions outside of the fact that, like, I want Twitch to be a platform where we're not spreading bad stuff on the war, nonsense, or stuff that doesn't represent those who are most vulnerable, most at risk.
By the way, the guy you said had the best convo about it, Matt Duss, actually, I don't know if you saw the fallout, but Hassan got mega fucking canceled for even talking to that guy. Because he was painted as a liberal Zionist dude, I never talked about it. I wanted to. It just got backlogged. But this guy, he was an advisor for Bernie Sanders, and he was so against Israel. All of his statements on the record were like, we need to do something. We need to stop sending them arms. They need to be sanctioned, et cetera, all this kinds of stuff you expect to hear. But they call him a liberal Zionist because I guess I really don't know. He doesn't think Israel should be demolished. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at, too. But yeah, so this guy somehow has a good take on Ukraine, but he got completely annihilated by Hassan's audience, who was not receptive, clearly, to anything he said.
I mean, we're 2 years into one of the most brutal sieges Gaza's ever seen. It's horrific what's going on there. What just happened at Al Nasser Hospital was horrific. What's going on with the famine, which the UN is monitoring, is horrific. And people have extremely heightened tensions and heightened emotions. And so, there's not really much the left can do right now out of power with Trump in office, and he does not care. He'll send 2,000-pound bombs. He'll send this, he'll send that. And the most that you really can do is raise awareness and make people really sadder about what's happening, or try to pressure your government. But there hasn't been a strong enough or wide enough pressure campaign to change anything. And so they're left kind of just yelling at whoever will listen out of rage and anger and sadness. I mean, it's very sad.
Yeah. But I agree with everything you said about Palestine as the war has kind of pushed forward. They keep making it worse and worse and worse. And there's just no limit, it seems, to the length that Netanyahu and his war cabinet is willing to go to ethnically cleanse. But my question to you is, I guess, why is it that so many people seem to care about what's happening in Palestine, rightfully, right? But at the same time, they can't find it they can't care about Ukraine. They don't care about it. They don't want to know about it. They don't read about it.
I think I always want to be good faith and assume that a certain extent of it is you care about what you know. If your friends tell you about what's going on in Palestine, if you see on TikTok what's going on in Palestine, then you're going to care about what you see. You're going to care about these personal testimonies that got you involved. Like a lot of personal testimonies in Ukraine got me to care about that. I know people in Ukraine. I know these communities. I've spent time in them. People have welcomed me to their home, and I've drank with them. They're wonderful people. I know them, so I care about them. I care about other things too. I care about the horrors that's going on in Sudan right now. I care about the updates in Nepal. I care about what's going on in the revolution in Myanmar. I care about these things, but I don't know them like I know Ukraine. And so I will always try to be good faith and assume that is the lion's share. But I also assume that for some people, there is a certain amount of aesthetic poison that they attach any type of militarized response to anything. That the left has been generally involved in anti-militarist activities in the Western world due to our involvement in Vietnam, due to our involvement in the war in Iraq, etc., XYZ, pick or choose, your choice. And so it's very difficult for anybody to think that by sending a country a weapons system, you could actually be doing some good. But if somebody's barging into your house and they're not listening to reason, they're not listening to negotiation, they're not willing to negotiate anything besides your disarmament and your dispowerment, then you don't really have much of a choice, especially if we've made promises in the past. And I don't think it's a leftist value to look like a backstabbing snake. So I think that there's a certain amount of militarist sentiment. There's some Russophilia that's in the left, that's left over from the Cold War and the Soviet Union. That's certainly there. I also think that it's very difficult to align yourself aesthetically with people like Hillary Clinton or people who are like the mainstream media. You see the mainstream media, you see them covering all these stories, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to be with them. I don't want to be with the people who lied us into Iraq or whatever the problem with the mainstream, the problem with the establishment is. And since it has that aesthetic, since the American establishment supports Ukraine, not currently, but since it did, you don't want to align yourself with the same people who are, sending weapons to the Israeli government or XYZ. And so it's very difficult for people to wrap themselves in the flag, I think.
Compared to what's happening, like when you look at social media, for example, like TikTok particularly, and on Twitter too, there's just tons of footage that somehow they're getting out, which is good. They're getting in front of people and they're really getting people to care about what's happening there. But I can't say the same thing for what's happening in Ukraine. And I just wonder why they've been so successful and why people trying to spread what's happening in Ukraine using the same platforms are not having as much success.
It might be that one conflict is more recent as when it started and the other one's maybe a little bit older. I think that could possibly contribute. I think that there's a lot more religious division here. While there is religious division in Ukraine and it exists with churches being shut down and the split between the church, it's not as interesting or not as historical. It doesn't have the headline grabbing potential of the religious divides between Muslims and Jews and how people portray that. I can't tell you all the reasons why, because in my chest, in my heart of hearts, I believe what's happening in Ukraine deserves all the attention in the world. Like the recent largest record-breaking airstrike killed an infant. It struck Ukrainian governmental buildings. I believe that should be on every headline. It isn't. It's people's job to try to change that. You can care about more than one thing at the same time. Hopefully people will.
Well, what do you think, Galia, as someone who's kind of watching from the sideline? Or not from the sideline, you're very much, your family's there, but...
Yeah, as someone who... I fled Ukraine personally, it's in September 2022, late September, but for me, when it all started, there was a lot of coverage around, and I was kind of hopeful, and I think a lot of Ukrainians were more hopeful because everyone around was talking about this topic. Right now, it's kind of also like swept under the rug, I would say. So I would actually want to ask Dylan if he knows even any leftist creators who talk about Ukraine on a regular basis who have an audience at this point. Like, who do you watch?
On a regular basis?
Yes.
No.
Nice.
I find the whole thing is it's just like they've turned, it just seems so fucked up. I don't know.
I know I talked about it previously. We did a whole segment on our podcast like a year ago where I specifically called out Hassan myself. And I did talk about tuning in into his streams during massive events that would happen to Ukraine. And I remember you just mentioned that you were helping with Kakhovka Dam flood, and you were helping saving people. And I remember when that bombing happened, I tuned in into Hassan's stream immediately because I was like, okay, he must cover this one because this is like the biggest one we've ever seen before. And his coverage is like, so we don't know who bombed it yet. Ukraine might have bombed it themselves. And it's so every time something happens, and I'm talking about Hassan because I used to watch him before and he used to be a part of this show, but it seems like all the large leftist creators just kind of like erased it from their minds, and almost are annoyed about talking about Ukraine.
Like, I sense hostility. Like, Adam Friedland asks Hassan, like, whose side is he on? And he laughs and says, I'm on nobody's side, which is just bananas to say, right? Like, you don't know who's the good guy and who's the bad guy in this conflict. Like, you don't know. And then Adam Friedland makes a joke about how it sounds about white to me, dude. I don't have to care about it. And although he's kidding, it is representative of something real that's happening on the left. And I honestly feel that they're hostile. They don't like it. They don't want to talk about it. They think that it's defending Ukraine is bad.
Yes, and like Dylan mentioned, it's not that the situation is getting better, so therefore we're talking less about it. It's getting worse. Every single month, if you go to UN reports and you just click on the reports, it's actually like July report. We had the breaking record for drone strikes in the whole war since May 2022. June, breaking record. May, breaking record. It's like months after months, it's getting worse, worse, and worse for civilian deaths, for civilian casualties. And it's just not being covered enough everywhere around. And what I sense from leftist creators right now, they're just saying, oh, you should just end it. Just put a ceasefire. And it's such a weird take where you're just like, I'm anti-war. I just want it to end. Yes, dude, everyone wants it to end.
But you know who wants it to end the most? The fucking Ukrainians on the front line.
Everyone
who are
wants
scared
it to end.
to death every fucking day.
There are like so many instances whenever I think about it, and I think about who do you even watch? Who do you even like suggest to people to watch besides like Dylan Burns? And everyone knows that Dylan Burns is the Ukraine guy, but there is not a single creator who would talk about this topic at least like weekly or bi-weekly and cover and analyze and talk to a single Ukrainian on their streams and actually talk to people who live there. It's not like I bet you a lot of Ukrainians would like to talk to Hassan. It's not like they're just being hostile to him and don't reply to him in the DMs. It's that he's never wanted to do that before. And just a lot of political analysts, everyone is ready to talk about this topic, but no one wants to talk about it.
I appreciate how you're kind of taking the prerogative to see the best in people, Dylan. I appreciate that. I'm more jaded, obviously, but I appreciate that that you lead with that. I think it's important for journalists to lead with that. So I think it is a good disposition to have, and it's obvious you care about it more than most other people in America. You're there, right? So I do value that sentiment, but at the same time, some of them are even pro-Russia, just outright.
Yeah, some of them are. I was actually listening the other week. There was like a random panel that I put on while driving, and it was like Lonerbox and Dylan talked to some pro-Russian guy on Week's panel. And I kid you not, I could not stop screaming in my car where like when I kept like hearing his takes about everything, I just could not believe what I'm hearing and that this person is alive and he streams and he has an audience. And like he was just so blatantly cold-blooded with his takes, and everyone knows it's a lie. And even moderator,
he doesn't have an audience.
Sorry?
If it makes you feel better, he doesn't have an audience.
Okay, that makes me feel better. But even like when the moderator is like correcting him and saying, "Dude, I'm fact checking it. That's not right," and he's like, "No, it's a fact."
Well, there are pro-Russia influencers that have a ton of audience. For example, who's that psychopath on Twitter that's...
Jason Hinkle, my best friend, who visited my town after me.
He wanted to fight me.
Oh, Hinkle. Yeah, sorry, that is. His name is
he
Jason?
went to my hometown.
Jackson Hinkle.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Such a huge person, such a celebrity. I could not get his name right. Yeah, he went to my hometown like a couple of years ago, and I watched him in the center, like just taking photos with a flag, Wagner flag, and like proudly praising himself in a new Russian territory. I was like, dude, that's like
insane.
My hometown.
So like people.
I remember when he was at Mariupol. Mariupol got bombed. The Ukrainians bombed it to attack some ammo storage or something, and his tweet was, "The Ukrainians are bombing me. They're trying to kill me." It was kind of funny.
I wanted to ask
this guy, by the way, if you're wondering,
one question to Dylan. Yeah, he is a legend.
This guy is one of the biggest piece of shits that has ever fucking walked the earth. Like, you couldn't imagine a slimier fucking scumbag. And he's got a ton of fans. He built his whole like he's very popular right now on Twitter. His tweets get fucking insane engagement, and he's really built it off the back of like, being anti-Israel and pro-Gaza, which is an important voice to have. But he's doing one thing right, but he's parlaying it into just a lot of evil. And I mean, he's also like pro-terrorist.
It's
So
not
like,
even, he doesn't even do that right. When you like repost like wrong footage from a different war or from a different event and you say it's this or that because your main goal is to make money and to get clicks and not to raise awareness, then you're not even doing something productive. You're adding rage bait, but you're not actually raising awareness. And so yeah, he can rave a Palestinian flag, but if you're taking dead kids and treating them like a algorithm trinket, then I don't really think you care, or you're even
oh,
helping.
he absolutely doesn't care. But he has gotten a lot of attention by, pretending to care. Here's the photo you were talking about, which is, I mean, it's just evil. Long live Wagner and Russia. Here he is in a captured town, flying the Wagner flag, celebrating Russia's colonizing of Ukraine. This is so psycho.
I know. And one of those guys' takes, like those pro-Russian freaks, one of the most crazy driven takes that I cannot handle is whenever they say that Ukrainians actually don't feel that there is war happening and they're like in their coffee shops or hanging out around and there is no war actually happening. Or like whenever someone celebrates a wedding during the war, those freaks like Jackson Hinkle, they will immediately repost it and like, I thought there is a war. Why are you dancing during a war or something like this? So my question to Dylan as a journalist, have you ever noticed war happening in Ukraine?
Quite often. I mean, I remember the first day I was in Ukraine, it was air alerts. I mean, and that's one way you see it. There's of course the drones that you can go over your apartments or go over your house, depending on where you are. Sounds like a lawnmower flowing over your apartment. There's of course the missile strikes. In Odessa and Kiev. Most of Ukraine is touched by the war. The only area that really is almost never touched by the war, it's like the Hungarian part of Ukraine. That's like the one area, and even that every once in a while gets hit.
Yeah, like this, like whenever I hear you got a coffee this morning, therefore there is no war, I just don't understand it, because what people don't understand that Ukrainian civilians cannot sleep for like a year straight because of strike. It's like a mental game that's played on every single Ukrainian, on like 40 million people. They just cannot sleep. They cannot actually function as a normal, healthy human being because they have to break their sleep every single night and go to a shelter. Mm-hmm. That's just the reality of it.
There's also some decent coffee shops near the front line. So, I mean, there's times where you go, you drink coffee, then you go to the front. That's how you get ready to the front. So you drank coffee this morning. There's no war. It's kind of hard to believe. You drink coffee before you go to war.
People like to call this a war, right? Like it's two equal sides fighting. Only one side is slaughtering civilians. Like how many Russian civilians have been targeted and murdered by Ukraine?
There are instances where I'm sure artillery fire definitely spilling over the border has hurt and killed Russian civilians. There have been some instances in the occupied Donetsk and Luhansk regions of some bombings, but it's nothing comparable. The biggest killer of Russian-speaking Ukrainians is Russia. I mean, it was that way for the entirety of their campaign through eastern Ukraine. I mean, the words human safari came from the way that they interact with the civilian population, hunting for everything from like civilian buses to ambulance drivers. So there's nothing really comparable to what the Russians are doing in Ukraine. There's no vice versa, really.
Is there any idea how many, like, I've heard the figure in total deaths is like over 1 million, which is absolutely insane. Is there any idea how many civilians have been murdered on the Ukrainian side?
Well, the July and August, it's the worst it's been since the very start of the full-scale invasion, since early 2022, when it comes to long-range missile strikes and such. I can't give you the number off the top of my head, but it's in the thousands. The vast majority of the deaths are military, are people engaging in assaults, defending trenches, and vice versa. But often, like these casualties are concentrated. The vast majority of civilian casualties are concentrated within like 15 miles of the front line of these artillery shells spilling into communities where people didn't want to evacuate because they didn't have the pensions to leave and they didn't know where they would go, or they're just stubborn in many instances. A lot of these people who wait are very stubborn.
I can say that there are around 17,000 civilians who are dead, and then there are like 35K plus that were injured during this war. It's
The
a
only
approximate
reason I'm always
number.
hesitant to give the number is that we can't do any data collection in occupied territory.
Yes,
Outside of
that's-
Mariupol, which is an occupied city, there are just rows and rows and rows and rows of graves where some journalists have estimated like 30 to 40 to 50 to 6, like insane amount of just graves that have been dug outside these major cities where a lot of people are still missing, and all you can really do is estimate. So it's very difficult because the Russians give no access to the United Nations to do body identification.
The 17,000 is only like the confirmed number that a lot of articles
At
usually
least
use.
17,000.
If we talk about Mariupol, it can be up to 60K, like by any other
Nobody
outlet.
knows.
Yeah, we can just
it
we
was
cannot
really
tell.
it was really vicious in the beginning. I remember when people were talking about it, I saw stuff of like, people, they were like hogtied and fucking executed. And I mean, this is just really heinous terrorism. I mean, it's just really no other way to put it. And I'll say the Russian army seems.
I would also say that the executions are increasing. The frequency of these types of executions out in the field have increased in the last year or two. You're seeing a lot more videos of drones, and it's only because of the drones we know that this is happening, of like floating over positions where POWs get executed one after the other.
My friends whose relatives are in the army, their relatives received messages on Telegram of their relatives being killed. So the Russian army would send them a video on Telegram of that person being slaughtered with a nice message.
That's unbelievably gross. I mean, Hamas on October 7th did the same thing. It's just evil.
I know like Turkish-backed mercenaries in Syria used to do the same thing to the Kurds.
It's just evil. It's just like pure human evilness. And there's something uniquely evil, in my opinion, about the Russian army that really has no parallel, as far as I'm aware, which is the mass kidnapping of children.
Yeah, it's pretty atrocious, and it's wild because the standards by which Russia has agreed to is that in wartime, any event like this, children that are captured are to be turned over to a third-party country. This is the international standard. The reason this is the standard is so countries cannot take those children, leverage them in negotiations, kidnap them, illegally deport them, smuggle them, sell them, or any harm can come to these children, because once you give it to a third-party country, they have no interest in hurting these children, or either ideological or otherwise. The Russians don't view it that way anymore because they view Ukraine as an extension of Russia. Putin has never changed this belief. He started the invasion by saying Ukraine can either exist as an extension of Russia or Ukraine cannot exist at all. And so when they were retreating from Kherson, when they were getting pushed back once their teeth started to get kicked in, one of the things that they evacuated wasn't only just like museums where they would loot all the museums of all the old ancient Scythian gold and put them in the back of trucks and get out of there, but also orphanages. They would raid the orphanages, snatch up the kids, and a lot of these orphanage directors would actually hide children in their closets and hide them wherever
That's
they could
terrifying.
in order to stop them from getting snatched by the Russians. And ever since then, the Russian view is these are Russian kids. They'll tell a lot of these kids that they don't have any family that wants them anymore, even for the ones that very much do have family that still wants them. And they're sent to different camps and adopted out across Russia. They even recently, I know I believe it was either the Donetsk or Luhansk occupational government recently made a public listing where you can like select for eye color and height and hair color, whatever kid you want.
Who's doing that? I mean, like, that's like appealing to like fucking child molesters.
They published a website and you could scroll through the photos of children with like their main characteristics.
How is this not like a headline? That is like unprecedented fucking evil. It's just trafficking children.
Yeah, it's so horrendous. It's the one thing that finally got the international courts to say, fine, Putin, you're wanted. It wasn't the invasion. It wasn't Bucha. It wasn't the human safari. What finally got the international courts to like react with such disgust that they actually put a wanted name on his reputation was this mass child trafficking operation.
And is there any idea on how many kids have been kidnapped this way? I've heard tens of thousands.
The exact number, people talk about it, there's estimations for exactly how many are still in their possession, because, they don't exactly communicate to the Ukrainians and like tell them we have this one, we have that one. So, but the numbers have been in the, I know I've seen over 10,000, 10 to 20,000 is some of the higher echelon numbers that I've heard. But I mean, even one kid is too many. Like the fact that This is even being discussed as, a side. Oh, well, is this going to be included in negotiations? Is this not going to be included in negotiations? Really just shows that the way we've approached negotiations is just waiting for the Russians to tell us what we want and then respond.
Mm-hmm. How do you see this war ending?
What I would like to see is, of course, like the Russians leave Ukraine and then the war's over. How I see it, it depends upon what pressures are put on Russia, because I don't see the Ukrainian government conceding to anything that has them giving up territory that the Russians does not currently control, or engaging in any sort of disarmament, which has been a Russian demand since the very first days of the war, their disarmament. So I think the Ukrainians are going to keep resisting. I think the Russians are going to probably keep pushing, and they're going to push as far as they can. And so when the Russians run into a brick wall and they slam their head against it a few times and they can't keep going, then maybe they'll consider negotiations. But you got to put them in that position. That means making it so that the Russian economy that is funding the war effort is brought to a halt. The Ukrainians have been engaging in a long-range drone campaign that is disabled, by the last estimates I've seen, 20% of Russia's oil refining capacity. They even stopped exporting gas because of how the prices have increased. In Russia, the energy powerhouse. So there is some ways that you can pressure the Russian economy, but you need to assist the Ukrainians in pressuring it if you want the war to end sooner. As for what Ukraine can do when it comes to their direct defense front, I mean, they need more equipment that keeps their men safe. When I went into Pokrovsk and I came out of Pokrovsk, it was in the back of a pickup truck. And if a drone hit that, we were all dead. If we were in an armored vehicle, maybe the situation would be different. And so if you care about preserving lives, then make sure the people who are protecting their homes have the equipment necessary to preserve their lives. Of course, that's my view.
I want to mention, if you're going in that pickup truck, it was GoFunded by Ukrainians themselves. People are actually like throwing GoFundMes for every single pickup truck that is operating in the army right now. It's not like it's being delivered to you by army or by country. It's being GoFunded. Every single armor on every single soldier is being GoFunded by Ukrainians, people abroad, everyone around. Your friend is going to the military and he's throwing a GoFundMe and you're just donating for his armor. It's not like US just magically funds everything.
Which is what they make it sound
Because
like.
it's often characterized like the Ukrainians have these super weapons. We've given them like the mech. They tried. It didn't work. Womp womp. But that's not really how it went. We were always kind of slow. Even during the Biden administration, you have to give Biden some blame too. We were slow in acting and trying to get support to the front.
Are these Western countries or allies of Ukraine doing enough to help them? I mean, I know America is kind of chilled out since Trump became president. He doesn't seem to care about this conflict at all. I mean, but what about European countries? Are they doing enough? Could they do more?
They're doing more because they're put in a position where they have no choice but to do more. I think the Germans getting rid of the debt ceiling when, they've been a pretty debt-obsessed country, in order, specifically with an exemption saying, hey, if it's an issue where we have to support a country that's being aggressed upon, it's an exemption specifically meant to direct more aid to Ukraine and allow them to expand their defense sector. We're seeing investments made. We're seeing Danish companies work to produce arms. We're seeing, Europe taking up some more responsibility. But if Europe does not see Ukraine security as an extension of its own, and they see it as something where they can pass the buck to somebody else, well, maybe the French should be spending more, or well, maybe they should be spending more, or I spent this earlier, so you're saying you need this now. But as long as they continue buck passing, they're never going to be able to really tackle the issue, especially without the United States. And without American artillery production and air defense production, they're never, ever going to be able to make up the difference necessary, unless they destroy the factories that are producing the munitions. But the long-range missiles that they want to give the Ukrainians to strike those factories, they need American approval because they have American components in them. So ultimately, that goes down to Pete Hegseth. He is the one who decides whether or not long-range missiles given by Britain or the United States can get fired into Russia to target these oil refineries that are funding the war effort. So yes, I think they should do more. Yes, I think that Europe has been dragging their feet and hoping that the United States might be able to bail them out. But also now the United States thinks that is a signal that they could shirk their responsibility and essentially just turn their back on Ukraine.
Is that what it's been? Is it just a total back turn? Because I get confused with Trump because he's like out one minute and then he's in somewhat on the next. It's very confusing about what is actually happening in terms of U.S. aid there.
This was always my biggest fear. The biggest thing that I know, my fixer actually in Ukraine, he's the person who organizes my embeds. He wanted Trump to win. And the reason he wanted Trump to win is he was just sick of the will they, won't they. Will they give us enough aid to win, or will we just keep dragging this out? I'd rather just have an idea of what's happening. Now that Trump's been in office, he's having a little buyer's remorse slightly. He's like, okay, I thought it would be more like first term. This is a lot different. I heard what people were saying, but I didn't believe them. I feared the flip-flopping. That was what I complained about on election night when I was on an election night panel talking about everything, is I thought he would flip-flop on it. That one day he might be in, but then the very next day he might be out. You could do everything. You could negotiate him the best trade deal. You could offer to pay for all this and all of that. But at the end of the day, if somebody gets in that room and can switch him around or make him think that it might be in his interest to work with the Russians or extend this a little bit more, then, he'll do that. Not to mention the fact that Trump is way out of his depth dealing with the Russians, and he has Steve Witkoff, a real estate mogul who has no clue what he's doing, as his main point man in negotiating with the Russians, which is why they've gotten dragged around for 8 to 9 months. It's because they have no clue what they're doing. They're out of their depth, and they're just hoping for the best outcome because Trump wants that Nobel Peace Prize, and he wants to be able to say he ended the war. If the war ended, it'd be simpler for them. He's hoping out. He's hoping it'll end, and he's being tragically hopeful, and it's costing lives.
With Trump, I agree that the only notes he has about Russia, it's like a little postcard and it says Putin seems nice.
He's
and
such a great guy.
Like sometimes he forgets about it and then he like pulls it out of his pocket. It was like, oh, he's actually nice, and he puts it back. And it seems like this, and he goes back and forth. And I thought he's a nice guy. What happened? And then like he is a nice guy, and that's like his everyday routine, and that's kind of horrible that billions of people are witnessing how like one deranged freak cannot remember any notes about one country, so therefore all other millions of people are dependent on that. Just because he liked him 20 years ago and he had like a really good dinner with him. So I wanted to thank Dylan for covering this topic ongoing. I want to encourage you to always post more content, to talk about it more, because that definitely helps. At least like people in the US, at least they have you to send your links to their friends and talk about the conflict. Yeah.
That's very sweet of you.
There's not many people
really
doing what you're
appreciate that.
doing, or any that I know of.
There's a few people. I spent like 6 to 8 months over there, and I did make quite a big pivot from what I was doing. So I think that specifically, but there are really good Ukrainian journalists who like put their lives on the line every day.
Ukrainian journalists, yeah. Just to kind of end the convo, it's why I think people don't realize how important diplomacy is. Russians are like extremely adept at this type of diplomacy, right? And playing people, and when you bring in a team of fucking bozos, like you said, some real estate mogul up against like the sharpest Russian emissaries, he's going to get played every fucking time. And that's why I thought it's so despicable how, there was this big leftist movement to not endorse Kamala. Because when you get a candidate like that, you at least know she's going to bring in qualified people with experience, right? But Trump's just bringing in his friends.
And you also know that from the day one, when Trump sat down for the first press conference that he's going to go for president, he started talking shit about Ukraine. From day one, he promised to end war in 24 hours, that we are sending billion and billion dollars to them, and they're like, blah, blah, blah. It started from day one. It wasn't like a surprise for anyone. Everyone knew that that's going to be the outcome. Ukraine is going to be fucked. Palestine is going to be fucked. Every other country that we don't talk about, US aid has been cut from every African struggling country. Everyone around is struggling. And like, I've seen reports that Trump's US aid cut might end up like killing millions of people just by not delivering enough food.
Yeah, that shit is fucked up.
It seems like people who were rooting for the third party all this time knew exactly what they're doing by not rooting for Kamala, which I know for a lot of people is not the right choice, but
perfect choice.
Not the perfect choice, but yeah, I just don't know. And
then the irony is people like Hassan are feasting on this, like Trump being an incompetent loser. screaming from like this is all of his content now, and he gets to talk about how evil and fascist he is. But meanwhile, him and all these leftists online, I say the majority of them, if not all of them, didn't do fucking shit when they had the chance.
4 more years of content.
And now they want to be heroes, anti-Trump heroes. It's pathetic.
I mean, I think that there were definitely leftists I knew that were doing their best. They understood the situation, and they're going out there to campaign and either to get Harris in there, or they would go and vote for her, uncomfortable about it, and then they'd work on down ballot initiatives. But I mean, I understand the feeling. My mother was a heroin addict, and I was very uncomfortable about the crime bill and how Joe Biden approached crime, how he approached like drug criminalization, and it didn't feel good really to vote for him the first time. I knew what I was doing, I knew what he had done, but I also understood the position that the country was in 2020. I also knew that when I'm voting for a politician, I'm not voting for a friend. I remember something I was raised by my grandparents. My grandmother told me once, I was talking to her about like Bill Clinton, because she voted for Bill twice. And I was like, what do you think about how, she treated Monica Lewinsky? She's like, I'm voting for a president. I'm not voting for a husband. And when the stakes are so high, you have to do what you have to do. I don't see it as I'm choosing someone to get a beer with. Voting is just one part of democracy out of 365 days. There's still union organizing. There's still protesting. There's still direct action. There's still other things you can do. If you just view democracy as just voting, then you have a really twisted view of how democracy works.
I mean, a president, you're not just voting for him. You're voting for everybody he's going to put in office, everyone who he's going to put in his cabinet, every judge he's going to, pick in his time there. It's so much bigger than just this one guy. Well, Dylan, thank you so much for calling in and giving perspective. I think it's awesome what you're doing, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm really happy you had me on. Thank you for giving some time to tell some stories about what's going on in Ukraine. I think it's really important that people pay attention. They don't lose hope, and they continue to support this country that has really bet its future on the United States and on Americans remembering what they're going through. So I really appreciate it. And if anybody wants to check out my work, they can check it out, Dylan Burns TV on YouTube. I write articles at offbeatresearch.com.
There it is. So check out Dylan. Stay up to date, and we greatly appreciate it. So thank you.